Honorable Minister for Education, Dr. Robert Lewis, other specially invited guests, our very special guest lecturer this evening, Ambassador Miko Pehala. I'm always a little nervous about pronouncing the name with the two little dots over the A, so I hope I'm doing it right. So far, so good. And we have here with us members of the magistracy, we have doctors, we have educators, we have private citizens, we have Booth Samuel from the CDF. And I think we have a nice cross-section of society, because all of us are involved in the business of education. Education is not only the business of those who work at universities and community colleges and schools and so forth. Education is the business of the people. And we are hoping that this evening we have a nice interactive discussion following the ambassador's lecture. I think it's a topic of major interest. I think that when we look critically and honestly at our education system, we have no choice but to conclude that there are some things that are very, very wrong. And we don't seem to be moving forward, despite the variety of initiatives that we come up with. We're always having some initiative funded by somebody or the other. We've tried different curricula. We've done a number of various things to try to resuscitate the education system and to have it moving forward. We just had the common entrance results announced, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, Friday? And, you know, of course, there were the usual children jumping for joy and the usual teachers patting themselves on the backs and schools boasting about how well-disciplined they were and how hard they worked. But as a friend of mine was saying this morning, nobody focused on the large numbers who were in corners crying, who felt as though they were failures, whose parents perhaps administered some serious doses of corporal punishment, and who felt as though their lives had perhaps come to some sort of end, you know, because they didn't get into the school of their choice or they got into no school at all. And we have to wonder, is this really what we want in education? You know, something is seriously wrong when our children are not doing literature in school, not doing poetry because there's no time. Something is seriously wrong when our children are not doing history after Form 2, where they're not learning about their ancestors, where they're not learning about who they are. And we have a couple of generations of children, of young people, who honestly believe that slavery was a myth. I've been told so by young people. They think it's a myth, they think it's a story. So something is wrong. And I don't think we have to go very far, examine ourselves very closely to realize that we really need to make some very serious decisions. They may be politically unpopular decisions, Mr. Minister, but I think somebody has to take the bull by the horns and make some very serious decisions about how we approach our education. So I just want to introduce our guest lecturer, because it's not about me this evening. It's about him and his discussion and conversation with you later on. Ambassador Miko Olavi Pehala, and he's Dr. Pehala, who studied at the University of, and I really can't pronounce this one, Dr. Pehala, Jyväskylä? Jyväskylä. There you go. It is spelled totally unlike how it is pronounced. Actually, he's the ambassador at large to Venezuela and the Caribbean, and he has been since 2011. Prior to that, he was ambassador to Colombia, Barbados in 2006, Guyana 2007, Trinidad and Tobago, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and he was appointed a plenipotentiary representative to CARICOM and the OECS in 2010. He has also been Finland's ambassador to Asia and Oceania, Peru, Bolivia, and the charge d'affaires to Pakistan. His other diplomatic postings include Czechoslovakia, Mexico, India, and Italy. So I imagine that he has really had an opportunity to experience quite a number of various education systems. He has been secretary to the United Nations Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel of the Global Environment Fund from 1991 to 95. And he has a variety of interests. His interests are very diverse. And he's written a number of books and articles on development, on birds, and on cinema. Okay, you put the 2 and 3 together. He has personally recorded, I think, more than 900 species of birds. And I believe he just had a wonderful bird watching weekend on Maria Islands this weekend. He enjoys coming to St. Lucia, I think, first for the birds and then for the people. He has actually won an award, the Finlandia Award in 1992 for the best non-fiction book entitled Amazonia, which he co-authored. And I imagine it's a book on birds. No? It's a multidisciplinary book. And he has won the National Biodiversity Award of Peru in 2002. He speaks 11 languages, and you'll be relieved to know that English is one of them. So we won't need a translator this evening. And he is married to Pia Sovio Pehala with 2 adult daughters. So I think that also gives him some authority to speak on the education of children, because he has seen his children educated in Finland, I imagine. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Mikko Pehala to talk to us a little bit, and we're hoping that afterwards the session, which will be moderated by Rafa Gordon, will yield a lot of fruit and food for thought. Ambassador?
In Finland, many of the schools are designed by the best architects we have, and you know that Finland is also known for very good architecture. We invest a lot in education and in the children, and Finland has been quite successful. We ourselves have been very surprised. We are among the world leaders also in competitivity, innovation, technological advance, investment in research, environmental sustainability, rational use of water, press freedom, absence of corruption, social equity, and so on. Already in 1850s, the Finnish church, Lutheran church, said to the young people that if you want to marry, you can do it only if you learn to read. Now, many young men, many young women, they wanted to get married, and they could not if they were not able to read. They had to learn to read, and they did. Now, I would also like to make reference to the national hymn of Finland. It says, "We are poor and we will never become rich." Now, obviously, the author was mistaken. He couldn't foresee into the future. Finland now is one of the most affluent countries in Europe and in the world. And we can understand this based on the fact that we have universal and free education since 1919, and it is obligatory. And we have participation of women in the economic and political life of the nation. And we had a very equitable agricultural reform in 1918 after a bloody civil war. The poor peasants were given land, but they were also given forest. And when Finland developed building our forest industry, the poor peasants became also rich because they could sell timber. They could sell timber to the forest industries, and the women were the first in Finland to get the right not only to vote but to be elected. To 1906. Education really is the measure of greatness of a nation. In Finland, practically all education is organized by the state. We believe in permanent education, and we have equity between social classes, gender, and regions. I gave your Prime Minister an important book, Level Spirit, how equality is good for all, for us all. I hope he will read it. The cost of education is about half government, half municipalities. Now, we do have preschool education for all children 6 years old. Please note, 6 years. It's voluntary, but 98% participate, and it takes place in schools and kindergartens. Formal education in Finland starts only when the children are 7 years old, because pedagogical education in our country, pedagogical research has shown that many children do not have sufficiently developed brain structure to assume formal education, all aspects of it. But of course, we encourage learning in the kindergarten and in the preschool, but there is no formal learning, no exams, no comparison among the children. The education is obligatory to anybody who lives in Finland, all foreigners, refugees, immigrants, and education is free of cost. And in the early years, we try to have the same teacher for the group always, so that the children will feel very secure and comfortable. And any children with special problems will always get special attention. We have schools even in the most remote places. They are mostly small schools. Only 3% are for more than 500 pupils. And if any child lives further away than 5 kilometers from the school, then the municipality arranges the transport, be it by bus or by taxi, even if there's only one child. We don't give any certificates in the basic school. But we do, of course, there is a screening, some sort of screening for access to the secondary level of studies, but there are no exams, there are no inspections. We believe in self-evaluation, and only 3 out of 1,000 do not complete the obligatory education when they're 17 years old, and only about 3% repeat a class at any time of their studies. And now there's a list of all the subjects. I'm not going to read it now. You can read it, you can get back to it. And if you're interested in a paper copy of my talk, I'm sure Mrs. Simon will be happy to send you one by email or give you in paper. Newsweek wrote about 2 years ago that the best education is in Finland. The scale was 100 points. I don't know how they gave 202 to Finland. I don't know who was their teacher in mathematics, but well, of course we were flattered. And Newsweek feels that the reasons why education in Finland is best, because it creates best capabilities, the cost is reasonable, the atmosphere in the schools is very relaxed. Very little homework. All teachers have master's degree, and we give a lot of individual attention to pupils. There is an international PISA program for comparing educational capabilities, and mind you, capabilities. They are not comparing substance knowledge. The 2012 PISA results are coming out any day now, maybe even tomorrow, I don't know. I haven't seen the latest results. And they're gradually increasing the scope of the comparisons. And the comparison is on 15 basic abilities needed in the future society. Um, and remember, it's not learning. It's the comparison is not about learning the content. It's getting the abilities to make conclusions, abilities to learn quickly, abilities to find data. In 2003 and 2006, 2003, 2006, the Finns were the best in practically everything. In the later, Korea got better results than us. And when science was first included in the PISA comparison, we were the first. In reading, Finnish girls have all along been the best. But in problem solving, some Asian countries have recently been better than us. In Finland, we have uniformly good performance in all areas. Very small differences between schools, between good and less good students. High degree of equality in performance. And there are very small differences between regions, poor regions, rich regions, urban areas, rural areas, very, very similar results. There are some gender differences. You all who work with education know that girls develop certain abilities earlier than boys. But Finland is one of the countries with major equality in terms of gender in the world. We had a female president, Tarja Halonen, for the last 12 years. In the cabinet, we've had a situation where most of the ministers were women. And we've had twice a female prime minister. Well, here, of course, St. Lucia had before us, but we've also had other important ministers. And we have a quota. 40% of the members in all public committees, a committee on defense, committee on health, whatever, has to have 40% minority gender. In the field of defense, they have to struggle to find the 40% women. In the health sector, they have to struggle to find the 40% men. Factors of our success is that the children all perform well without regard to their social position or ethnic origin. The Ministry of Education only gives the hour breakdown. So many hours for history, so many hours for first foreign language, so many hours for second foreign language, and how many hours for music, for sports, for mathematics, and so on. Everything else is delegated to the schools and to teachers. And we have no exams and no inspections, but we do have a lot of self-evaluation so that the schools and the classes, each teacher, each student know how they perform, what they don't know, where they need to improve. And in Finland, the highest prestige professions are those of teacher and policeman. This tells something about our society. Their prestige is more than that of diplomats or doctors of medicine. Only 10% of the applicants get to study teacher training. It's so sought after, and it's only the baccalaureate when we have a national exam. Distance learning is promoted. Education is free and health is provided, special education. Anybody with a handicap, mental or physical or whatever, they get special attention. Free school meals. There is a liberty of religion. Any group of religion, if there are 3 pupils, they will get education in their beliefs. Ethics is taught to all. The students have their own associations, and after the first years, every child has their individual calendar of classes. For superior studies at university level, sometimes it could also apply in the high school. There is a study grant and a state guaranteed study loan. There can even be a housing subsidy. Not all take them, but for instance, those who live at home, they don't need any housing subsidy. But they have to qualify, they have to pass a number of subjects in the university in order to get those grants. The local authorities have the main responsibility to support the education, and almost all schools belong to municipalities. There are a few private ones, for instance, International School of Helsinki and so on. Some belong to the state. The national radio and national TV also contribute a lot to education, and mind you, all films, foreign films in Finland have subtitles in Finnish and Swedish. Swedish is the second national language, so we learn the language also while we are having a good time in the cinema. Maybe you also here have subtitles, I don't know, in foreign language, foreign films. And we protect our minority languages, which are Swedish and the indigenous language Sami, and immigrants. In Helsinki, it's possible to get on Saturdays classes in 40 different languages because we have immigrants from so many countries. Now, when we have very qualified, well-prepared teachers, it guarantees that the quality of teaching is high, that the public, the local community, everybody has confidence in that the education is good. And we have uniformity of teaching between schools and teachers, irrespective of what books they plan to take for the school. Every school, every teacher, they decide, oh, I take this book, I take that book. But still the uniformity of the results is there. And the most important thing I think which foreign visitors have found interesting is that the teacher does not act as a gendarme imposing discipline. They act as a facilitator of discoveries. I remember an important book from the 1960s. It was called Education as Ecstasy. If we have a penalizing atmosphere in schools, it's an impediment to good learning. If students are afraid of failure, they will not learn. There is a close relation between the school and homes. We do have challenges. Many immigrants, growing numbers of unemployed, marginalized people. They might be faced by exclusion, and the financial crisis in the world would perhaps require more subsidies for services, and it's difficult to provide them. We must work more to eliminate violent tendencies. You saw the horrible murder in Norway where one high school kid killed over 70 fellow students. We've had same kind of events a couple of times in Finland with, of course, much less victims. The financial crisis is now pushing for greater school size. This is not a happy tendency. Some problems we might experience is that the age groups are smaller and smaller because the age pyramid, we are a huge number of people approaching 60, 70 years of age, and the number of children in each cohort is less. Many teachers are retiring soon. Also, we give tertiary education in polytechnics, vocational universities, and it's sometimes difficult to draw the line. What is university and what is a vocational institute? The state has taken too much resources from the municipalities. The municipalities are really struggling hard to finance all their obligations, also in education. We have had traditionally, we've had a system of popular colleges, working class colleges established by the Social Democratic and Communist parties, and then popular colleges which have been funded, for instance, by industries and municipalities. And they provide, they work a lot like the Open University here, I would say. Important is access to research. We try to bring research to our universities, even to schools, as much as possible. And Finland is one of the countries that invest most in research and development. Finland, Sweden, and Korea are the leaders. Now, you've been very patient with me, and I'm so happy to have such a distinguished audience, so many people here, professionals, interested persons, and some issues that you might wish to debate. What is the best age to start formal education here? Maybe brain development happens easier here than in Finland, we don't know. You can ask Dr. Rose Davies from Jamaica, she's an expert on that. Can schools perform if exams are reduced? I think you cannot just implant the Finnish model here. You must very, very carefully look what would work and what would not, and in what context. Parents here would get very upset if their children didn't have exams. They would immediately lose their belief in their confidence in the school. So you must think about that. Will your children learn without negative sanctions? Will there be enough positive incentives? How would you produce school materials for St. Lucia or for the Caribbean? And this is the most important. This, I think, is the number one thing. How to improve the status and prestige of teachers. That is so important. Thank you very, very much for your attention. And I have some brochures about Finland's relations with the Caribbean. Those interested are most welcome to take. I don't know if there's enough for everybody, but we'll distribute them as much as we can. Thank you very, very much.
I think that's the kind of lecture everybody likes, you know, right? Really short and to the point. And this is actually what the things that the ambassador pointed out that really resonated and struck a chord with you. Teachers seem to have more control over their curriculum, and teachers are actually trusted. Textbooks don't teach children. It doesn't matter what textbook you use. Teachers are not trusted. And it has come to a point where teachers no longer even trust themselves. You do have enough time to teach as much as you wish. And you don't have to slavishly, and the children will pass. They doubt you. They know they won't pass. I have to teach it this way. Not seeing that most of the time they're doing the children in the service. And they don't trust that if you just teach the children, But we have teachers here, and perhaps teachers will talk to us. So to moderate this part of the evening, Mr. Rafa Gordon, who is the curriculum, one of the most qualified persons here to moderate this. He's with teachers every day of his life, and he's in the schools all the time. So let me take
Hello.
Rare opportunity for us to get some insight into an education system that is so different from ours, and to be able to determine how it is that we can borrow from some of the excellent strategies that can be implemented here. So I encourage you to, as much as possible, ask the questions. The only thing better than this would be a site visit, which the majority of us would not be able to have. So let's take advantage of it, please. And we're going to start off our questions. Our first would come from Ms. Monroe's. Modest.
Thank you very much. We cannot say that there's no corruption. We can only say that Finland has less corruption than anybody else. But there is a historical background to that. We never had a feudal society because bioproductivity is so low that you couldn't have concentrations of agricultural production. We had individual farmers. One was here, another was 5 kilometers that way, third one was 15 kilometers the other way, and so on. We couldn't have intensively farmed agricultural areas like Central Europe has. We also never had colonies. Well, we may have tried, but we never succeeded in getting any colonies. Also, we were 600 years part of Sweden, then we were 100 years part of Tsarist Russia. And the first Tsars were good, but the later Tsars were bad. So it was the autonomous Duchy of Finland, the government of the autonomous Duchy of Finland, that was an instrument against the evil Tsarist court. So the Finnish people identify themselves with our government, even now, with independence, and also because it's a very egalitarian society. There's a deep sense of honesty and justice, and also, well, I don't know if it is true, but in the Lutheran religion, you can't be forgiven your sins, so you'd better not be corrupt. In special education and for problem children, there's usually one person looking after its child if the situation is difficult. But in kindergarten we have maybe one teacher for 3-4 kids. Yes, it's expensive. Of course, it is expensive, but look, I'm not a professional, so I might not have really the final answer. In primary school, the class size is maybe around 15, 20, and in high school, just before they write the baccalaureate, it could be like 25, 30 students. And university study is completely different. There we don't have classes. It's very free arrangements of schedules. In basic school, after the first few years, between 15 and 20. This is my gut feeling. It's not my better knowledge.
Thank you. An observation. First of all, as an educator in Caribbean, a lot of what you show there is in heaven. Unbelievable. But I guess the statistics and your achievements speak for themselves. As it says, there's definitely something we have to look at. And as you went through, something seemed to underline, or I try to, within the little that you gave, they try to understand the secret to all of this. And it seems to me that one of the major answers is not actually in the education, the system, the teaching, and all of these, yes, as heaven as they are. But fundamentally, what came up from there is a political answer. And the whole business of equity, the whole business of equality, understanding that every child has a right to learning and can learn. And it seems to be a deliberate political choice of providing access to everybody across all divisions, across the exposing them and understanding that education is so fundamental to life and development. And that seems to underline, in fact, the actual word is recurring. I think I just wanted to underline that observation. Move towards providing access to everybody who might be already to education.
And the other Nordic countries have somewhat similar results. Our results are better, a little bit better than Norway, Sweden, Denmark, but they are largely along the same lines. And interestingly, the book that I gave to your Prime Minister, it shows that that educational results and many other social indicators are always better in egalitarian societies than in societies that have big differences in income and social status, irrespective of the absolute level of income. You can have a much more successful society with a lower level of income, lower level of production, but they don't have the social ills if there is equity. It's an interesting proposal. I should like to demystify a little bit this belief in the Finnish education. Please take note that the Finnish language is written in a phonetic way. So whenever anybody in Finland hears a word, you will immediately know how to write it. This is not the case with English, it's not the case with French, not even with Spanish or Italian. And that may explain a little bit why Finns are so good in reading. It doesn't, of course, explain everything, but I think we have an advantage there. Maybe we are not as good as they believe, maybe we are just about there.
Even some schools represent back on lunchtime because we want the students to push more work. And then after school we have extra lessons and we're pushing more work. And then they go home, they have homework for about hours again and they go to bed about 11 and so on. So what is your school day like?
The school day, thank you for the question. The school day is not very long. In the first four years, sometimes there could even be one day of only 4 or 5 hours, or two days like that. The school days are not terribly long. My granddaughter, she's 10 years of age, and mostly she goes to school by 8, and the school is over by 2 usually, so it's about 6 hours. Now, in Finland, mostly both parents work, so then it is necessary to have usually some activity, after-school activities, but it's not formal learning or teaching. They are not obliged to do anything. They have the liberty of doing music or arts or something. But of course, music, arts, sports are always part of the school curriculum. Now, we always have a variety of school books, and they are developed by groups of teachers. Whenever a group of teachers, when they want to produce a school book, they do. And we have a very high level of educational material so that the children learn through play. First of all, in the kindergarten, they learn through play. The huge majority of children, even when they start the preschool, they can read and write a little bit. They might be able to count a little bit, but there is no record taken of that. There is no comparison. There is no obligation. It's a voluntary thing if they learn that. But the school books and the exercise books are such that with very little effort, the kids are led to understand what is essential in mathematics, for instance. So we need very little homework. My 10-year-old, maybe she does 20 minutes, 30 minutes homework, but very seldom anything more than that, because she's able to do all the necessary exercises in school. we find it very important not to have learning stress for the kids, because learning stress would be an impediment to learning. It would not facilitate learning. I want to be very emphatic about this. If you try to compel children to learn, they will not learn. Well, there is an exception, of course, Korea and China. There you compel the kids and they do learn. You have to decide which lesson you want to take. We feel that it is more important for children to play, because when they play freely, they become better socialized. They learn to respect the rights of other children. If one child tries to take the toys of the other kids, it's not the teacher that stops that, it's the other children. That's how a society should operate.
This is a good opportunity, I think, to ask a question that I want to pose. It is related to the matter of teachers having, or without the exams, and the matter of accountability. Now, interestingly, I read an article in the New York Times where a renowned Finnish authority on education was interviewed. Pasi Solberg, I don't know if you know him.
Not personally.
But I noted something that he said. I thought it very interesting, so I wrote it down. When he was asked about the accountability of teachers and administrators, he said there is no word for accountability in Finnish. Accountability is something that is left when responsibility is extracted. Now, my question is two-part. I don't know if you identify with that ideology espoused by Mr. Solberg, whether that is actually the Finnish ideology for education, or whether that's his own view. Was he to be taken literally that there is actually no word in Finnish, or was he referring to the nature and structure of the education system? And secondly, what exactly is done to be able to remove that sense of account, or how do you accommodate for that, in other words? Having no exams and yet people being accountable.
Thank you. It's a very good observation, and I can understand that in other cultures it might be difficult to understand that, and in other cultures you would stress the requirement for accountability a lot. Somehow, because of the very good preparation of teachers, the collaboration among teachers, the question of accountability does not arise. The auto-evaluation works so well. Each student can, through tests, of course we have tests in schools, we have a lot of tests, but they are not exams. You're probably not given grades, but you will see where do you make mistakes, how do you correct those mistakes. And you saw that a small percentage of students do fail the annual class. But all this is seen through tests, but also pupils, they often have joint projects where they do jointly some papers or experiments, and by and large there is such a good atmosphere in school that the question of accountability just does not arise.
Okay, and the word accountability in Finnish?
Well, it's not a word that we use. We can translate it, but it's not a word that we use in the public debate.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go back to the floor. Ms. Devo, you've been indicating. Go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned that the children start school at 6, right?
Preschool.
Preschool at 6. Now, does the municipality provide some sort of play school or whatever in each of the municipalities for the children whose parents are working, or so they have their own little play schools, if you want to
Yes.
call them that beforehand. From first to sixth sort of thing.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, we have, every family has the legal right to have their children in a kindergarten from the age of 3. And probably the majority of families do use this. The municipalities, they have to provide the kindergartens. They are municipal, the kindergartens. Maybe there is 1 or 2 private Montessori type kindergartens, but the Montessori ideas are applied in all municipal kindergartens anyway. The preschool, the kindergartens are provided by the municipality by and large, and preschool is always provided by the municipality for the 6 years old, and it operates either in a normal school or in a kindergarten on certain hours. The introduction of the legal introduction of the preschool only came about 3 years ago. So we don't always have the specific facilities for that, but it, as an institution, it exists and functions.
Thank you. We'll come back to you. We'll just take Mrs. Montut.
I was just making the observation that regarding the accountability matter, I made the observation that you have as part of your curriculum this in your schools, and I wanted to ask you first and foremost, what do you have for your teachers in training? Do you also have ethics in there, and do you also have professionalism courses? Because that would, if you do, I would imagine you have it. That's why you have such good quality teachers, and there's no issue of accountability. Because that would take care of some of the problems that we are having in the Caribbean and in other systems. The fact that in the Caribbean we don't have, I am a teacher trainer, and we don't have ethics and professionalism courses, although we are training teachers. And so it is left, therefore, to the teachers to make their own decisions about how they're going to do things, and having persons making themselves subject to the authority of other persons to look at them to see what they're doing. And that's where the fear is, not trusting themselves and not trusting the knowledge that they have. So I'm saying, it's a good thing, and I would wish for us to use this opportunity as we are hearing about it, not to just say, "Ooh, that's such a good system," but let us think as well about, incorporating, having the will to incorporate some of those things into our system. I've always lamented the fact that we don't have that. Ethics, civics, professionalism, none of that in the school system, especially in teacher training and at the higher tertiary levels in our country. We always tell our teachers, you must be professional. We tell persons in positions of responsibility in government, you must be professional, you must be ethical in your practice. What is that? They don't know who's teaching them that. And so I'm very glad that you are saying that a lot of what's happening in your system, and you're having some very, very good things happening in the system, but I'm seeing a lot of it is coming from the foundations that you're providing in ethics and those kinds of areas. It's very important, and I want us to think of that as well. There are a lot of us educators and professionals in here. It's something that's really, really important. I also wanted to ask you.
Can you just, because he hasn't answered your first question.
Ethics is being taught definitely in teacher training, but I'm not that well aware of details. But I hope that we get your experts to Finland to look at it closer. Not every one of you, but I mean a nice selection.
Yes.
And your second question?
My second
briefly?
question: what is your political system? Because tying in with what Mr. Samuel said, I was listening to them saying, oh gosh, there must be something about the political system that is enabling that kind of egalitarian kind of educational system that you have. What is your political system in Finland?
Well, we used to have very presidential political system, but when the Soviet Union collapsed, then we shifted into a more prime ministerial political system, and we have proportional election to the parliament, which is one chamber only. So we have a plethora of parties, and in order to have a functioning government, we need a coalition of 4 or 5 different parties. And at this particular moment, we have the left-right government, and the center is out.
Okay, thank you. This gentleman here has been indicating for the longest while. Go ahead with your question, sir.
Thank you. My interest is on the process. I'm not sure, Ambassador, if you are privy to the change process. I presume there was a before and there's a after in terms of where you've gotten to. Maybe your before may or may not be like our system. So my question is, how did that come about? How did the change process unfold? How long did it take? What were some of the mechanisms by which it happened? And what were some of the critical success factors in the change itself? Because we are at the point where I'm presuming we would like to change, and maybe learning from the process of change might be useful.
Thank you. Very appropriate question again. We did have reasonably good public education since 1919, when basic education was made obligatory, but we did not have sort of high school like facilities in all the villages. In my own village, my parents got together with a number of other parents, and they started a private high school so that we could get education until university, until we should enter the university. But very soon thereafter, the government took care of all the government assumed the responsibility for all the high schools. The comprehensive school in Finland and Sweden, Norway, one can say that it was modeled to some extent on the education system of the Soviet Union. Maybe because we had very strong leftist influence. The social democratic parties were very strong in the Nordic countries, but now all parties are fully behind this education system. But probably it was the political left that was decisive in bringing about this comprehensive and egalitarian education system.
And a lot of people think that ICT means that it's a very techy thing and so on, and probably doesn't bear a lot of relationship to what we're hearing about in Finland. The observation I want to make is this, that with the ubiquitous nature of knowledge and the availability, increasing availability using these technologies, the role of the teacher is inevitably going to change. The teacher can no longer be this authority, both in terms of knowledge but also in terms of control in the classroom. The technology is going to drive education systems, if they're to be successful, and if they're to gain from these technologies, it seems to me, towards the Finnish model. And I just wondered whether I have visited Finland and discussed that with Finnish educators, but I wondered what opinion you have on that, and whether you agree with my view.
Yes. Well, I did not have in my presentation, but I fully agree with you. Technology is changing the role of the teacher. We are getting more and more social networks, and the kids are really wizards at the computer at a very early age. They can do things we can't even imagine. If the technical facilities are there. In the Caribbean, it's a bit of a costly step to provide a number of computers to schools, but I think it would pay off handsomely if it could be done.
Okay, thank you. We'll switch to the other side. Okay, we'll take the ladies first. So we'll hear from another principal.
One question and a comment, if I may. First, for clarification, you said that your country made some advancements in reducing gender inequities. But you also said that in universities, there were more women, much more women than men. I don't know exactly why is that. If you reduce the gender inequities, why is it now that in the universities you have so much imbalance? You have more women, so many more women than men. Is there any reason for that?
Well, it had all the legal rights, but still, salary-wise, they were not equal with women. With men, they still are not. There is still a certain degree of salary discrimination against women, and the Finnish lawmakers felt that we must introduce quotas. We cannot leave the defense and army matters to men alone. Women must be there, and also vice versa. Men must take part in decisions about the soft subjects of society. It's a little bit like household work. Men have to wash dishes too.
Countries that have also followed your model experience, and do you have any data to show any success in these other countries? Now, other question, because anytime I see success in the education system of the country, I always link it to my country, St. Lucia, and see how can we follow that model. But I know that we are different countries. We are different economically, socially, politically. There are so many differences that we may not follow closely exactly the model that your country has followed. But there are two areas that I think we can learn from based on what is happening here. And these are areas we said about inequities, reducing inequities in the school system, and reducing competition among the schools. And I'm saying this because, and I think from observation, we have a lot of overt and subtle inequities amongst our schools. Now, based on the observations of the school system, basically, for example, the current results were just released, and if you look closely at the results, there is a national mean, the mean for all the students. Some secondary schools will have students getting the top marks, basically. The bottom students, their mark is way above the mean. While other schools in our society, the top students, their mark is below the national mean. And so basically the exam system actually it encourages that inequity by promoting differences in schools. And there are so many other areas where we are unequal. Even in our primary schools, where you have the private schools and the public schools, you have inequities. In the public schools, you have a lot of inequities, basically. So I'm wondering how, if your model is saying reducing inequities will improve the system, improve academic performance, how do we, in a country such as ours, with all our problems, how do we tackle that situation? Now come to competitions, again, and it's the same thing. Teachers are forced to prepare examinations, and you said that you have reduced examinations in your country. But we have tests, we have assessment, but not examinations. But we have standardized examinations. Students are prepared for various exams throughout their school tenure. Teacher, in doing this, it has its advantages, but the big advantage is that teachers are under pressure. Schools are compared based on the results of these examinations. We have to admit that. Right now, I know the list of schools, top school to bottom school, the primary schools, based on the results of the results. So we know, we are comparing our schools, the teachers know that, the principals know that, and because of that, the teachers are under pressure to prepare the students. And because they are under pressure, they use teaching strategies that are probably not appropriate. So we have a lot of problems. Well, so my main point really is that I'm glad it's working for your country, but how do we tackle that? How do we use your system in those two areas to improve our system based on our problems?
And I don't think any country would have implanted the Finnish education system. But what you say, of course, it is true that there are tremendous pressures to compare schools on the basis of exams. But I'm saying, if kids have to study for exams, then they are not studying for capabilities. Then it hampers development of their capabilities if they have to focus so much on exams. You could try having a little bit less exams, a little bit less stress, and see if children can get more enthusiastic about spontaneous learning processes.
Can I competition between schools? I used to work, I'm a teacher originally. I worked in quite a few educational authorities. One of the educational authorities I worked in is the Finland's Education Authority, which you might have heard of. It was done away by Margaret Thatcher. Not because it failed, but for the opposite reason. Finland's Education Authority had a test for children at the end of their primary time in school, the London Verbal Reasoning Test. And that test identified, if you like, children's ability in terms of reading. But they weren't then assigned to schools on the basis of all the best children went to one school or another. They were assigned to schools on the basis of what was called a balanced intake. So every school the aim was to get every school with a cross-section of children from those tests. And if people were worried about accountability and whether the schools were succeeding or not, the other thing that the Finland's Education Authority did was they kept the results from those tests. And when the children got to 16 and they took what was then O-levels, they then pulled those test results out of the drawer and they made a comparison between the value added that school put on. So they looked at children to see how have they done in the verbal reasoning test at 11, and then how well have they done in their O-levels. And what we found was, of course, that schools that did have a certain prestige, because even though we had the balanced intake, those schools that were thought to be better than others, but usually those schools were in the more middle-class areas. That's how they were identified. If you actually looked at which schools had added the most value to children, taking the difference between their verbal reasoning test at 11 and their O-levels, you almost got the opposite situation. Those schools that were thought to be so good actually weren't that good. So, it would be interesting, wouldn't it, having watched on Friday the results coming out in the Wales Street and then going into the ministry today, seeing loads of parents queuing up. I had to ask what they were queuing up for. I didn't know. It would be interesting if you took that away in St. Lucia and said, no, children we're going to test them when they get to 11, but we're going to use those test results to have a balanced intake. So we'll assign children to the schools, but it won't be all the top marks go to one school and all the bottom marks go to another. Just the opposite.
Okay, Sean, I think we definitely appreciate that. We'll go to another principal in the back who yielded to Mr. Samuel in just a bit.
Language is critical, all those things are the joys you get. And that's what research is showing. So I'm just wondering, the role of research in Finland among teachers?
I'm trying to. You're asking how does the educational research influence decisions in Finland?
We have specialized educational research institutions who put out a lot of publications. Now, I'm not an educator myself, so don't put too difficult questions to me. What I would say again, have a closer look at our system, or bring some really professionals from the education sector here. This is what some other governments are doing, like Colombia. They've been organizing a large number of seminars. They bring Finnish educators there. The Dominican Republic is doing the same. The Education Committee of the British Parliament came to Finland, the Education Committee of the German Parliament, they came to Finland, and so on. Let the professionals talk. I hesitate to answer this question. It's a relevant question, but I really can't give you a satisfactory answer.
We appreciate your honesty, Mr. Ambassador.
But you say that there are institutes of educational research.
There are,
responsible
yes,
for that.
Absolutely.
And in the presentation also it was indicated that they're one of the leading countries for investing in research. So I think most likely there would be a great nexus between the research that is done and decisions being made in schools and even politically to influence the education system.
Yes, that is the case.
Question over here, and then we'll come to the next side. Go ahead, miss.
I call it more conventional system examination to tossing them out. I mean, in Finland, there was a time when you had examinations and then you checked.
Yes, I had examinations all the time.
I'm curious about that period of change and the re-education of the stakeholders in education to the new system. I happen to teach something rather unconventional myself, which is a movement-based approach to language teaching. And I think that one of the greatest challenges is to convince the students, the teachers, the parents, the school board, and anybody else who happens to be involved that this is a good idea. And it's rather coincides with yours that there should be a looser, more relaxed, less stressed, play-oriented way to learning something, whether it's language or something else. And this does seem to involve a tremendous amount of re-education for people who are involved. Now, when you changed from the more conventional system to the system you have now, how did you approach this re-education?
Well, the pedagogical research, the institutions of pedagogical research that brought out new strategies. We had big changes in our education system. We were much more exam-oriented before, but reality showed us that this kind of a way is better for us. Now, I really don't want to say that you should implant our system. It would not work because your social context is so different. But you must analyze honestly, without preconceived ideas, your own society, your own education system, and I'm convinced that you can come to very good conclusions and you can get excellent results. What I have seen of the Caribbean education system, that you produce excellent professionals. But many graduates from Caribbean universities have reached very high positions in the United States, in Great Britain, in some other countries. What the problem is in the Caribbean, in my view, is that the large mass of students do not perform adequately for your countries to have real progress, economic, scientific and technical progress. It's not the problem of the top, it's the problem of the bottom, and that you need to resolve, and you need to find the way, and you must analyze your own society, your own education system, how to do it.
Excellent observation, and I think that's what most of us here would have in our minds as well. Even with the references to the common entrance and the results, the concern is, what do we do about all of those at the bottom, those who did not meet the mean, as you indicated, sir? So we'll hear from another educator, Mr. Charles.
There seems to be a lot of investment resources as far as the education system. How much of the national budget is allocated towards education in Finland? And why I ask that is because I know, for example, the Ministry of Education might have its budget, and so you go to the Ministry of Finance, but there what you might have is that people cutting out the budget because they themselves might not understand why you need so much money. So why, how much of the national budget of Finland is allocated for education?
I'm sorry that I can't give a figure, but I promise to find out and let you know.
But from what we see, even without getting a figure, but from what we saw in your lecture, they will appear that it is a hefty sum. It is a good amount.
Yes. Now one thing, because all the education is free, and because it is because all the education is free, because it's provided by the basically by the municipality, it's not terribly costly. If we had a large number of private educational institutes based on the profit motive, education would cost more. Now, fortunately, in spite of being public in Finland, it's good, because Finns believe in the common good. Mind you, if somebody doesn't pay his taxes, then the neighbor will denounce him to the authorities.
These are some of the social structures that reference has been made to, which would make that kind of system work. Going across, go ahead with your question, comment, please. Thank you for that observation. We have another question in the back. Go ahead, sir. Yes?
Hello. I've had the chance by things that I don't expect them to be surprised by. Foreign in nature, and to get out in a hallway and walk fractions made so much sense to me. And such a simple thing seems novel. And it's just these sort of things, I think, that they're what they can do themselves. It's very interesting. And I mentioned that one teacher stays with the group, or do you get a teacher in Finland?
Kids start the school, so one teacher teaches all the subjects, or at least if a teacher is, if there are 2 or 3 teachers for different subjects, they remain with the same kids for 3-4 years.
Right, and that would offer such a different perspective. Actually, that's very similar to many of the principles of Waldorf education, for example. But I wanted to ask how it is that, and this is more for, how is it that you can provide the teachers with the autonomy, or would it be fair to say that the teachers would automatically see many different models of teaching?
We do not have perhaps that many models of teaching, but because our teachers have very long summer holidays, so they often participate in courses, university courses on different subjects, and where they interact with other teachers from the rest of the country, and there they can exchange their experiences. So that helps. We don't have much international teacher exchange.
Thank you. I was just going to say, one of the other things that's a challenge that the teachers raise is when ideas are, that's a very interesting part of the picture that I don't think can be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. We're going into the line. Okay. So we have about 20 minutes left, so we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity, invited ones, professionals, etc. We'll go to Ms. Edward, and then we'll come to Mr. Greaves in just a bit.
Master's degree. it means, they have mastery, a certain level of mastery over the subject area. It means they have that sense of self-efficacy, that confidence. They don't only have peripheral knowledge of the subject area, they have sound knowledge of the area. So they don't need somebody, looking over their backs. They don't need that level of supervision because those people have mastered the content of the subject and the pedagogy. So that is another important ingredient that we cannot miss. People who have that level of mastery that they can manipulate the learning situation. I think that's important.
If I may be devil's advocate here and generate some more discussion, would it not still be possible, despite that situation, that you have teachers who may not be performing?
Precisely. Yeah. I'm saying there's no system that's perfect. Yeah. We're not looking for heaven on earth, but I'm saying we could understand that those teachers bring something into the learning situation that a teacher who doesn't have that level of mastery will not be able to.
You want to respond to that, sir, or just?
No, it was a pertinent comment.
All right. I asked Mr. Greaves. Oh, you want to respond to that specifically? Okay, go ahead.
You are not given that autonomy. Your hands are still tied. You go to school and you are trained, and you are not given any say in the decision process. For example, a curriculum. I've been teaching for over 25 years, and I have never had a say in what the curriculum should be like. If the curriculum is just the set of people put the curriculum together and they said, this is what you should do. You are trained, you have no autonomy, you have no say, your hands are tied, and you are forced, even though with the new knowledge, you are forced to continue the same old way. Because you're just not given that freedom.
Okay, thank you.
Let me first thank the whole campus for this session that's really exposing us to some very interesting ideas. I want to endorse again the observation that Boots made about egalitarianism and that Jeremy made about ethics. When I listen to the presenter, I see ethics personalized. He's not trying to say what he doesn't know, just being honest, and unless as human beings we move from an ethical foundation, unless as a government we understand that it's unethical to do some of those things we do, deny students this, send students even here. And when we come to understand ethics, and I'd like to know from the presenter, the good ambassador to tell us that ethics is everybody teach ethics at all levels. How do you do that? It's critical. If we do not know how to behave properly with each other, it doesn't matter how qualified we are, we're going to take our corruptive responses all over the place. So thank you for highlighting that. And could you tell us some more about how the ethics program in Finland and in the schools, how that
There are books written on ethics. I don't know how many different books there are, but every school must have maybe every student maybe 1 hour a week on ethics. I don't know details more than this. In teacher training, yes, it's very much emphasized. Now, I'm not aware if there are psychological tests for teachers. I wouldn't be surprised because of course we cannot allow that sadomasochistic personalities would become teachers, or that anyone with tendencies for pedophilia could become teachers. So, but I don't know about whether there are such psychological tests, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were.
There's a couple of things. Comparing and contrasting our system and yours, a few things stand out for me. One, you seem to be your system is more concerned with how you process information and learning how to process, how to think. Ours is more concerned with learning content and delivering content back on an exam. And so I think that's an important distinction to make in this modern world where information is readily accessible, but processing information is the key. And the other thing is that your system is more concerned with not having failure, whereas ours seems to generate a greater sense of failure in our children. So I think that's another big contrast between the two. And the issue of equity that Mr. Samuel raised is interesting. And I remember Mario Michel talking to me when we were doing health reform about equity and what we mean by equity. And equity is not equality. Equity is you give more to those who need more. And that's interesting because if we had a system of equity here, we would give more resources to those who were not doing well. And so I think it's an important thing when you say equity, at least for me, to understand that it's a sensitive approach to understanding what your people need and delivering that to them. And it can be differences. So one can do a lot more than the other because one needs a lot more than the other. And my question to you really is, are you in discussion with the Minister of Education and University to have a real deep and meaningful process of education reform discussion and solution?
We are open to all such proposals. And thank you very much, Dr. King, for your very pertinent observations. I share your conclusions, and very, very proper what you said about the importance of equity, how equity is a different concept from equality.
Okay. Mrs. DeVoe?
I think one of our basic problems is that everything comes from the top down. And you're the teacher in the classroom, and obviously you don't really know what you should be doing or whatever. And when teachers do have very good ideas, that some of them are similar to these, they can't get them going because nobody will trust that they can do these things, and we don't get enough from the bottom up. And in other words, working with, what you're working with. And I mean, a classic example in our system here happens to be the technical schools. I mean, everybody knows we need technical schools, everybody who teaches, and yet we're not getting them. We're getting the same old standard, you must do this by this, and get whatever. And I think that discourages a lot of good teachers to continue trying to change the system. So I think that's something we really need to look at.
Thank you very much. In response to that, directly, Ms. Edward?
Ask teachers to, make learning fun and to have more student-centered, kinds of activities. That's what we really call it. And then when you get back to the schools, then this whole thing. But the thing is, how can you ask a teacher to adopt student-centered practices where the children are supposed to grow, and develop at their own pace, when there is an exam that has to be done at age 11? So forget all the nice things you do because by age 11, you have to meet those standards and pass. So then, let's be honest, the teachings are not student-centered. It ends up being very teacher-driven.
Exam-driven, not teacher-driven.
Exam teacher-driven, because you have to reach that goal post, basically. So, all these nice things about life and reality, right? The other thing too, in terms of technical schools, first of all, I don't think it's wise to say that we should have more technical schools to accommodate those children who are not academic. We shouldn't do that. That is passé. Yeah? Because whether or not you doing academic subjects or technical subjects, you need a break. Yeah? And we have schools. We have schools like Marigo Secondary that are equipped, right, with the latest, more so than, say, one of the traditional schools. But the problem is, parents still don't want their children to go to a wonderful school. Yeah? So it's something that it's a major shift that has to happen in the entire society. And it can't be teachers alone doing it, and it can't be a ministry alone. The society has to be ready to make that change.
Yes.
I do apologize for being late. You said in your presentation that it is very difficult to tell the difference between the technical schools and universities. You used the word blur. And surely that's what we've got to do. We keep saying, oh well, we'll put the less academic children in the technical schools. You have to be, as far as I'm concerned, you have to be a genius to be able to do plumbing properly, or anything properly. So the problem is us. We're saying, we're making a difference instead of creating a blur. And if you can teach us how to create a blur, that would be wonderful.
A policeman in Finland, first you have the basic education of 12 years, and then you have 4 years of police academy. It is, well, you can say it's almost like having a master's degree, and that's why we respect our policemen. The policemen are the most respected profession in Finland.
Thank you. In schools, and we still, because we send people to St. Mary's and those other schools, we still have those schools there, but we don't have the students to, we don't even, and those schools don't even attract the teachers, because we do not make it our duty to take out this thing about this is a top school and this is a very top, and that is a problem I have.
Minister has not, the Minister of Education has not spoken, so this will be an opportunity.
But you see, it's the point we're making, everybody's making, the society. How many of you really, if you had your children, because it is very easy for people to say what they're saying sometimes and trust them to put their children and start. If you have children at the age 11, how many of us here tonight would want to do it to begin to show an example to say, I send my child to that school? Because, you see, no, hold on a minute, because it's the same thing about universities. It's the same thing about universities. You see people talking all over the place, politicians, doctors, everybody. But the children don't go to some schools because they have a certain perception of what school they want to child. So I think unless I begin to see some, unless I begin to see some change in those who are choosing, because the same people who say about these things are the same graduates from St. Mary's and St. Joseph's, and they send the children back to the same schools. So I don't know what we really want. I think it's a good discussion, but we have to begin to show by example.
Okay, Mr. Harvey.
It's such an education for me to hear. But as you spoke, it struck me, we should be asking you what needs to be changed. We should be asking ourselves what needs to be changed. And when I hear about a little girl in the area of PI who did outstanding well, and they say she's going to the convent, and I'm aware we have highly qualified teachers in all these secondary schools. You know, some of the schools that they think are second-rate here, when I go there and I see the caliber, and younger people too who can identify with the students, you see, there shouldn't be all, look at the transportation that child is costing. She should be in a school in the Vieux-Fort area. So, and I don't think, therefore, zoning to me is not something that we cannot tackle in the Caribbean. We have to have the will to do it.
I'm very much experience. I'm an educator, so I'm coming from a different perspective. I'm very interested in this whole concept of using education to achieve social justice. And I was wondering, in Finland, was this whole sort of revolution created by a movement, or was it driven by laws? For example, the concept of having very few private schools, is that contrary to the law to do so, or is it because the system is so good that it doesn't really make sense to have a private school anyway? So I'm just wondering, this whole thing in Finland, How did it come about? Was it that the people rose up and said, this is what we want? Or did the government say, this is the law and you have to?
Thank you. Yes, we've had very broad democratic discussions on all educational reforms. The Education Commission of the Parliament is very, very active. And for instance, I can tell you, before becoming a diplomat, I was academic secretary of the National Union of Students, and the Parliament invited us to give our views on all important aspects of education at the Parliament, at the Commission. Also, then we had the National Union of secondary school students. Now it doesn't any longer, it no longer exists, but they also used to give their views on educational issues. And we had very, very strong debates. Of course, there was also opposition to the comprehensive school from the conservative parties, from the right wing, but the comprehensive school idea prevailed. It's a gradual development. We have very gradually come to where we are now. There was no educational revolution. Everything was gradual, but everything was done with very thorough public debate and parliamentary debate.
Thank you.
Well, it goes both ways. Well, we had the bloody Civil War, which ended 1918 and 1919. The winners, that is the rich people, the right wing, they brought about the obligatory basic education, and they also instituted a land reform which brought about equity in land and forest ownership. So they were clever enough to be magnanimous, which has served them well, because thereafter there was no need for any other revolution.
Mr. Samuel, we will make that our final comment.
It's a curious question. Who form other education system?
How do they perform?
In other education systems, how do they adapt to system that is so exam-driven and so on? Do they survive?
My kids, they have mostly gone to American system schools because we mostly lived abroad. So they are not examples of Finnish school kids at all. But well, they did reasonably well, no problem about that. Well, we send students to study in foreign universities, but not many Finnish people go to study in the basic school abroad. It would be very, very rare. The baccalaureate exam at the end of the 12th year, and that is the only basis we have for comparing schools with other schools. That can be done. It's a national baccalaureate. Not international, no.
From Finland?
No. Yes, only, it's national only.
The international would be the PISA, which is done for a number of countries.
It is also an international baccalaureate program.
No, but we don't have it. We don't have it.
Okay, it's now 9 o'clock. I think we can wrap it up at this point. We've spent quite a bit of time talking, and much of the discussion has focused on our own education system. It means that there is a lot of introspection that needs to be done, and I certainly hope that many of the persons here are very well placed for that, will engage in that, and will start the process of the discussion to determine how it is that some of these wonderful practices and strategies can be implemented in St. Lucia's education system to be able to make strides and move from where we are. We thank all of you for your contributions, your questions, and certainly thank you very much, Mr. Pahala,
yes,
for being with us. I will hand you back to the mistress of ceremony.
Well, I've given this talk in many universities, in many countries. I've never had such an active and engaged discussion as now. And I never had in my audience a governor general or a minister before.
So unfortunately, we've come to the end of our session. Minister of many such discussions and education reform is under one shot. It takes years. In Finland, it took 14 years, a long time. So it's not like it happened overnight. And I think there's some critical questions that we were left with. What are some of our cultural aspects that we need to change? What are our attitudes, our views? We seem to lack a certain... It might be a good thing, Ambassador and Minister. So I hope that you continue the discussion and the talk and so forth. At this point, I would like to just make the presentation of a small token to Ambassador Behala to thank him for his presence here tonight. He actually stayed an extra day after the conference of heads just to do this. So I'm happy that he allowed himself to be prevailed upon by me. And you know I can prevail upon people. So Mr. Craig Mitchell will make a presentation to the ambassador at this point.
St. Lucian products. Excellent. Wonderful, wonderful. My wife will also be happy.
His wife will also be happy. You see, now that's a man who knows what's what. Thank you so much for such a stimulating discussion. It was an excellent stimulus, as you can see from the results. I would like to thank Her Excellency for gracing us with her presence. A dedicated educator of many years and a fervent supporter of the Open Campus and its initiatives, and of course, a celebrated UWI alumna. So we can expect no less. And I would like to thank the Minister, the Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, and I appreciate your honesty in admitting and accepting that all is definitely not well. So we appreciate that. You know, sometimes officials tend to be defensive, and you know, this official certainly wasn't. I'm happy to see that we had some teacher educators here. I hope that you take back some of these discussions to your classes with teachers. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time off on a Monday evening. I'm sorry it had to be Monday, but that's the only time the ambassador had to come here and have some intelligent and stimulating discussion with us.